Hello, Blackhawks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Four Feather Podcast. Hawks split a pair of games over the course of the last couple days, but we're here after a 4-1 victory over the Toronto Maple Leafs. I am Ron Luce. I am joined by the boss man himself, Mr. Tony Marchese. Tony, I think we're both pretty high on the Hawks tonight after a big win. Victory beers, hashtag crack 'em. How are you doing, my friend?
Victory beers, Ron. Cheers! I already cracked this one, so I'm gonna have to wait to join you in the old crack 'em and celebration. But I got a couple more lined up right here. Also, very high on the Hawks right now. It's man, it feels good to watch this team play good hockey, Ron. And I'm ready to break it down with you. How are you feeling after that win, man?
I'm feeling incredible, Tone, because I think tonight we saw perhaps the two best periods of hockey this team has played so far this year in that second and third period. I think what they did in the second to kind of blow the game open a little bit, what they did at the end of the third, obviously, we're going to talk all about it here. But I'm feeling good, Tom. I think it's a good night to be a Chicago Blackhawks fan here in the Chicagoland area. And as always, our friend Skokes. What a game, dudes. Completely agree. And if you want to join the conversation like our boy Skokes here, be sure to jump over to the YouTube, hit subscribe, hit the bell button, you know the drill, and follow along over at On Tap Sportsnet YouTube page as well. From our friend Zach here, Big Hawks W, second period phenomenal. Soderblom was on point, hashtag crack 'em. Tony, let's get right into it, shall we? We unfortunately have to talk about it very quickly, but on Saturday night, the Hawks did fall to Montreal. It was a 3-2 loss. Ultimately, it was 3-0 going into that third period. Tony and I, as all of you now know, if you listen to the show long enough, plus 2,000 looked real good going into that third period. I think we both hammered it. Unfortunately, it didn't cash. They fall short with just 2 goals there in the third. Tony, they looked sluggish, and it just wasn't their night on Saturday night in the Bell Center.
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. It was not their night, but the plus 2,000 at the second intermission, we got a nice ride out of it. It was still an entertaining hockey game. The Hawks kept it close. I'm gonna blame this on missing Hall, man, in the lineup, and obviously some good injury news. But I thought the Hawks had a little bit of trouble getting some offense generated off of that first line. When you've seen Hall in this lineup for 60 minutes now. And we'll talk about the win in just a second. Totally different team. He's one of the more important pieces here, and missing him definitely hurt them in Montreal, in my opinion here.
Yeah, and you know what? It just felt like the team was down in general. Weren't sure what Hall's status was, as you noted, Tony. Obviously, good news. He plays on Monday here tonight in Toronto, but he was week to week. We talked about it. Who was going to replace him on that top line? And it only had to be Taylor Radish for one game. But in Montreal, you noted, absolutely, I agree with you, man. I think we didn't realize as Blackhawks fans collectively how important Taylor Hall would be to this team this year. I think we've seen it through the first 4 now, when he's in the lineup versus when he's not in the lineup, and the type of effort the team has when 71 is on the bench and on the ice. So completely agree with you there, man. But like you said, I think that's a perfect way to roll into tonight, because that was a forgettable game. It sucks because it was hockey night in Canada, as everybody knows, over at Four Feathers. But Tone, they make up for it tonight. They practiced yesterday. Coach CLR says, boys, no morning skate. You need the rest. They came out tonight firing from the jump, Tone. I mean, we got to talk about that Hawks getting out to a good start. Outchanced the Leafs 6-3 at 5-on-5 in that first period. Overall, outshot the Leafs 9-6 in their own barn.
Yeah, I mean, no scoring here, but they definitely went into this game with a little bit more energy than you saw out of them on Saturday night. I was surprised at how many chances they were able to rip off. I mean, this Toronto lineup is filled, I mean, up and down with just good players, Ron. I mean, there's too many of them to name right here for the sake of time. But, I mean, you even forget guys like Max Domi are in this Toronto lineup, down, what was it, the third, fourth line tonight, Ron? Because that's a guy that you saw as a Blackhawks fan all last year, generating a lot of scoring opportunities, playing up on top lines for the Hawks last season. So a lot of depth there. And the Hawks were able to come in and just handle their business in the first period. I think that really set the table, set the tone, I guess, maybe, Ron, set the tone for how the rest of the game was going to go. Would have liked to see them get on the board a little bit earlier than they did. Obviously, plenty of chances there in the first, but solid period to play overall.
Agreed. Solid period of play indeed. A comment here from a friend of the program, Russell. He says the first line is awesome. And it really is, I think, awesome when Taylor Hall is a part of it.
Did you
Truthfully,
just
Tony.
introduce your dad as friend of the
I
program?
did. I did. I did just introduce him that way. But no, man, I mean, incredible night. And like you noted, they got off to a good start. Hall being back certainly makes that. Kind of that jump in that top line and then in the rest of the lineup as well. But Tony, it wasn't all fun and games in that first period. Nikita Zaitsev went down with a little bit of what looked like an injury at the time, took a kind of an awkward spill into the end boards behind the Hawks net. Ultimately, he goes to the dressing room before the period ends. And then Tony, Connor Murphy, standing up for his teammate, goes after the guy delivering the hit and Gregor and takes care of business. A nice fight from number 5 before the end of the first.
So I was a little conflicted on this, Ron, and I'm curious how you feel about it. I felt like there's a case to be made here that when Zaitsev leaves the ice, we're not privy to any conversations as he's leaving the ice, goes to the bench. Maybe it was just, hey, I got to go get, patched up real quick. But the way this went down, and I always advocate for guys stand up for their teammates. In fact, I love the fact that this Blackhawks team is not afraid to stand up for their own guys. And Foligno even talks about it in the first intermission. However, I was a little intrigued that it was Murphy who was the guy to square off there. One, we don't know if, Zaitsev's coming back to this game. You're taking a 5-minute penalty and, you're with 4 defensemen after that. I was a little concerned about that choice there. If you know somebody's going to do this, it might as well be like a Corey Perry or somebody else to go do that. The other thing, man, Connor Bedard had a great look right there. And if that fight starts, the whistle blows. I don't like seeing that when we're in the offensive zone with a scoring chance. I feel like we took the puck out of our own hands there. At that very moment, I was conflicted, but I was also, on the other hand, glad to see that they were standing up for their own guys. So it was sort of conflicting to me. I'm curious what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I think it really kind of does feel like a double-edged sword, right? Because like you said, it's awesome to see the response that we heard from Nick Foligno between periods talking to Darren Pang. And as soon as he asked him, he goes, yeah, that's why Connor wears one of the A's. That's why he's a leader on this team. That's why he's so respected, because he sticks up for his guys and he's a team first guy. And that's just how he plays. So I think that energy boost was something that the Hawks wanted and I think helped a little bit, especially kind of rolling into that second period. But completely fair point, because if Zaitsev doesn't come back and Murphy's chilling in the box for the first 5 minutes, you're down to, like you said, you're down to 4 defensemen, 3 of them being very young defensemen as well, in Vlasic and Korchinski and Kaiser.
Yep.
It could have been a scary situation, but obviously didn't work out that way, but certainly I think worthy of concern. Tony, an excellent point brought up there. But Tony, you know what? It really did feel like it gave the energy as needed, just like apparently I've given my dad some energy. He says, thanks, dude. All love. Everybody knows this is Papa Loose by now. Friends of the program will know, and fans of the program will know who Papa Loose is. But Tony, let's get back into this here. Second period, Andreas Athanasiou doing work down low. Mackenzie Entwistle dresses for the first time this season, gets some separation and space out in front of the net. Grandma was in the building and he delivered. Yep. Goal Mackenzie Entwistle. Hawks are out 1-0 in front of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, stuff you love to see, Ron. You're a big Mackenzie Entwistle guy. I think you and Johnny have been both very high on Mackenzie Entwistle's game, and it's good to see him get one in his first game of the season. Just right off the bat here, that's a hell of a way to start a season for a young hockey player, Ron.
Absolutely, completely agree, Tone. Yeah, I've liked Entwistle. I think this system under Luke Richardson allows Entwistle to play maybe the best version of his game, because he's a big body. He has some skill. He can kind of be that true power forward that I don't think this team has had in quite some time. I know that's your favorite type of player, Tone, a good old power forward. You might come to love Entwistle just as much as Johnny I do. Also, he wears a great number, 58. Fantastic number. For anybody that didn't know, that was my high school football number. So It's a very special number to me, and I like number 58. But
So you're not biased at all on this.
no, not at all. No bias here. No bias here, Tone. Because the Leafs got one back, Tony, and immediately we were up here, and then we got okay, it's 1-1. Settle in, see how this goes. But the Hawks responded, really good goaltending all night, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But Corey Perry on a beautiful outlet pass from Alex Vlasic gives the Hawks a 2-1 lead at the time, and Corey Perry delivering a little, hey, that's for you fans after they'd probably been chirping them all day long coming into this game. Big goal for Corey Perry, first as a Blackhawk. Big goal for the Hawks. They take the 2-1 lead.
Yeah, you tagged me in a post on the old X machine right away there when Corey Perry scored that goal. I was curious to what you were angling at with that post on X. I want to say tweet so bad, and I'm trying to stop myself. Just, we're working out the kinks here. Yeah, but I loved that, man. And, major kudos to Vlasic just finding him on that stretch pass. That's a portion of the offense, man, that you used to see a little bit more with these Hawks teams when they had, I would say, a significantly better roster than what I think people have considered this roster to be. Man, if he can start to find guys, I didn't even know that this was part of Vlasic's game. I don't know about you, Ron. Haven't seen that much. He really came into his own tonight. We'll talk a little bit more about some of these other plays with him, but I think this was an important one for Corey Perry. He's been all around the net in these first few games of this season. He's wanted one, and not a better way to put it. Put your first one in the net on a nice little breakaway right there. Give your team the lead.
Yeah, well put, man. You got to love it, especially these veterans have really kind of stepped up early in this season. It's not all reliant on Bedard to create the offense. Everybody in this lineup is stepping up. And speaking of guys that are stepping up, Tone, he had 2 goals on Saturday night in Montreal in the loss. He gets the first power play tally of the season for the Blackhawks. Tyler Johnson has 3 goals in his last 2 games, and he also gives the Blackhawks a 3-1 lead at that point.
Yeah, he's might be the hottest offensive player on this roster right now, Ron. And let's just think about this for a second, though. This power play has been abysmal. The fact that they got off of this little streak that was potentially building into some bad news is really important for this Blackhawks team. You can't miss opportunities like this. We've seen time and time again. You saw it here tonight a couple of times as well, where Toronto was able to make shorthanded look like they were the ones on the power play. That's got to get cleaned up, but it's very important for the Hawks to get one here. And Tyler Johnson, not a better name to do it. Man, stay hot, Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, and in Philip Kurashev's absence, Tyler Johnson, Andreas Athanasiou feels like a little bit of chemistry to start this year. Early on, maybe that's something that Luke Richardson keeps together going forward. Tony, not only was the goal #hot, as we like to say here at Four Feathers, but it was also the first for another youngster, Kevin Korchinski, picking up his first NHL point, coming via that secondary assist on the Johnson tally. So good for 55, getting his first point, and it comes in a win. So both he and Connor Bedard getting their first points in a win. Maybe he'll have better fortune when he gets his first goal. Hopefully that'll be in a win, unlike Connor Bedard's. But Tone, they weren't done there. One quick thing that is worth noting, it was a power play that ultimately felt like a penalty kill for the Blackhawks, but Lucas Reichel using his speed tonight to draw what felt like could have been a very important penalty had the power play gone better for the Blackhawks. Nonetheless, good to see Reichel kind of jumping out of his shell and getting things going, because soon after that, Tony, empty net goal from Hall, they challenge, it's negated. Offside was the call. Come down the other way. Toronto makes it 3-2. No. CLR says anything you can do, I can do better. He wins his challenge. No goal.
Did he challenge that play? I thought that was an official review, like an automatic review. I wasn't sure. I didn't get clarity here.
I believe he challenged it. He said, hey, if you're going to play that card on me, when we had the goal to put this game away, I'm going to do it to you. And it worked out perfectly to him, because then after that, things were looking up. We had Darren Pang narrating beautiful words, just like our friend Jonathan Nani saying, protect the house, as Johnny always says here on the podcast. And then Radish ultimately with the empty net goal to seal the 4-1 victory. Tone, before we go into depth and analysis, after that Radish puck goes in, what was your feeling? Like what immediately started going through your head in this situation with this Blackhawks team that is now 2-2 through 4 games this season?
Ron, the first thing that came to my mind was this is exactly why I said they can be 3-2 on last Monday when we were given predictions for this.
Yes, you did.
Because there's something about this team, and I said after the first victory that the Luke Richardson effect was on full display in the first win. This was another one. Tonight, I felt like they played, for the first time, I think, a full, complete 60 minutes of hockey. And when's the last time you've said that about a Blackhawks team? Probably a couple of games last year. And you can see where Richardson's coaching sort of was on full display. It was on display again tonight. The second thing, poetic justice for that last minute of hockey, which was incredible television to watch. I mean, there's plenty of things that you could be watching on TV tonight. You got Monday Night Football. You've got the NLCSs going on, and you've got Blackhawks hockey. Obviously, for you and I, first screen viewing with the Blackhawks tonight. And just an exciting regular season Chicago Blackhawks game with all sorts of poetic justice that takes place there. You described it very well for all the listeners who might not have seen it. Just the back and forth here. I thought it was an official review. If it was a Richardson challenge, I would like to think that that is even better when it comes to the poetic justice here that I'm talking about. And we'll get into, the salt shaker in just a little bit, our favorite segment here on the show. But man, this is exactly why I thought this team can go in and compete. This is a gauntlet of a schedule, Ron, that they have.
Yes,
A gauntlet, absolute gauntlet. And to sit there and be 2-2 after your first 4, that's a good start to this season, a very good start, because we don't know where it's going to go from here, but they've been competitive in every single game that they've played. That is what's most important. We wanted fun hockey to watch this year. We're getting it. And that is all that we can ask for.
Yeah, incredibly well put, Tone. This has been a fun team to watch. And Tony, something that was really fun to watch tonight, that just throughout the game, it almost felt like he got stronger and stronger. And that was Arvid Soderblom. He looked phenomenal tonight. Obviously, I think really good overall team defense from the Blackhawks. I think you got to give credit where it's due here. It was a complete team effort. But Soderblom made some incredible saves, especially late in this game with the extra attacker for Toronto. He came up time and time again, ultimately on the night, 36 saves on 37 shots. Tony, the three of us sat here and talked about it ad nauseum coming into the season, that the defense and the goaltending might not be good enough for this team to truly compete. And I don't know if it is over the course of 82. But in a just 60-minute window that we saw tonight, the defense and the goaltending may have been the strength of this team at times, which I don't think is anything you and I expected to say, at least this early in the season, with effectively 3 rookie defensemen in your lineup on a nightly basis. Nikita Zaitsev is D-man number 6, and you have an almost entirely new team from a year ago. That was impressive, and it honestly all stemmed out from Soderblom and net for how good he was tonight.
It did. There's so many good things to say about his goaltending performance tonight. There's so many good things that you can say about this defense. Things that you said that you didn't expect to say. But Ron, I think the big question that I have to ask you right now, you're Kyle Davidson. You love being GM, Ron. Are you sending Korchinski back right now or no? Because I want to know where your head's at with this. He's one of those 3 young defensemen. Here's your sample size 4 games in. What are you thinking? Because I think you and I differed on this a little bit coming into the season.
We did, and I think I have maybe retreated off of my end a tad, but I will still stand on that he will play games in Seattle this year. I really do think it's still going to happen. But Kyle Davidson has already made it very clear that he has absolutely no issue burning a year of the entry level deal. He did it with Lucas Reichel a year ago. He very well could do it with Kevin Korchinski this year. He did it with Wyatt Kaiser a year ago. He's okay with these guys getting to that next contract sooner because, in theory, if they're not as far along in their development as they would be had that contract slid another year, maybe you get them at that bridge deal for a couple years. And that's how you start to build those layers of your contracts that we see all the great teams do, right? You get these young players on
GM Ron is
favorable
at work
deals.
right now.
I am at work right now. You get the younger players on bridge level deals when they're ready to get the big payday because they're hitting their prime. Your other superstars or other top players are starting to phase out. They move up. You get young guys that keep coming in. That's how you create dynasties. That's how you become the Colorado Avalanche. That's how you become the Vegas Golden Knights. That's how you become the Tampa Bay Lightning for the last some odd years. That's how you become the Blackhawks during the Cup run, right? We saw seasons where Brandon Saad was the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed rookie in 2013, and then 2015, he's part of one of the best lines in hockey for 82 games and a playoffs and another Cup run. You have to have guys that continue to come through and build up in the lineup. And in order for that to happen, sometimes they have to sign a little sooner. I think Korchinski's entry level gets burned. I think they don't let the contract slide. I think he's here 12, 13, 14 games. But if like a guy like Isaac Phillips or Ethan Del Mastro is playing very well in the AHL and Korchinski starts to struggle, I think there is the world still that we see them say, hey, you go to Seattle and go kick the shit out of all these little 18-year-olds in WHL. We're going to let one of these guys get some look. You're here next year for sure. And as soon as your season's over, you're up with the team, assuming you guys don't go on a deep playoff run like you did a year ago. So I still am not going to completely agree with you, Tone. I know you think Korchinski's probably going to be here the whole year, but I think he's going to be here longer than that window when you got to make the decision on do you want the contract to slide or not. I don't
What
think
is
it
it, 9
slides.
games?
It is 9 games. Yeah. So I think he goes 13, 14, 15 easily. And you know what, Tony? I hope I'm sitting here in 25, 30 games, kind of eating my words a little bit because he's playing that well to earn a spot in the NHL. That is just even better for his development as a young defenseman. It's even better for the Hawks' trajectory in terms of being competitive. I think it moves them up a year, to be honest. Maybe not to be Stanley Cup contenders, but very well, at least playoff contenders. That would be massive for this Blackhawks front office, I think, and just the Blackhawks timeline in general, if Korchinski is able to do that. Tony, while we're on the topic of D-men, I want to get your opinion. You asked my thoughts on Korchinski. Now I asked my thoughts. What do you think of Alex Vlasic so far? Because I am astonished. I am excited. This is, I think, what everybody hoped he was going to do this year was make these just, he feels like he's in the right spot at every time. He's big. He's got that long reach. He knows how to use it properly when it comes to poking pucks away. He did it tonight. He jumped on right after that power play. They were getting they were getting Foligno off the ice, bringing Vlasic on, and immediately Toronto has a chance. Huge poke, and he pokes it almost to the blue line and out of the zone. Incredible, incredible play. Vlasic has done that all of these games. And Tony, it's crazy to think, but maybe that preseason game that we were at was kind of Vlasic solidifying himself and saying, I am an NHL defenseman now. I'm going to prove it and continue to prove it into the regular season because through these first 4 games, Tony, honestly, I think there's an argument to be made that he's been the Blackhawks' best defenseman in the first 4 games.
Contributing on everything, Ron. And this is, you missed one word here. And I think one word sums it up. Confidence. He's just oozing confidence right now. I couldn't have guessed that he was going to be your best defenseman through these first 4 games. I don't think anybody could have. Coming into this, I mean, there was questions whether or not he would stick on the top D pairing. And right now, 4 games, I wouldn't have him anywhere else. The big body part, you can't teach size. That is, I think, the most important part to Vlasic as well here, because he is really tough to play against. NHL defensemen, man, who are big dudes and can still handle the puck. You see him jumping in on rushes. You see him able, like the play that you described where he reaches out and pokes that puck out of the zone. He's in the right spots, but he knows how to utilize his size to be effective. And that right there makes him all the more dangerous. And as I was talking about just a minute ago, these NHL defensemen who are of his stature tend to cause tons of problems and get a lot of press time when a team makes it into the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'm thinking Victor Hedman is like the first example that sort of shows up here when I'm thinking about this. I don't think that's a perfect comp, but top line giant defender. Maybe. You never know. Who knows? Just throwing some things out there, Ron. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it was an incredible watch tonight if you sort of honed in on him. I'll make an exception to my rule. The rule being, if I don't notice a defender, they're doing their job. When I notice you for the right reasons and you can see him all over the ice today, that is, I mean, the only other defenseman that I really noticed for the right reasons, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Nicholas Hjalmarsson on a night in, night out basis. There's a case to be made that you've noticed Vlasic in these first 4 games. That's a really encouraging sign.
100%. I think what fans are starting to notice, Tone, on that topic, I think he's going to be here for a while and be a part of this kind of core defensive group in that top 4.
And Stan Bowman can't trade him.
No, he can't because he's gone. Because he is gone. Tony's trying to run away from me and run away from everybody because he brought up the SB name.
Yeah, I almost got away with it.
Almost taboo. It's almost taboo around these parts. Tony, while still focusing on players, want to go to a couple of comments really quick here from everybody joining us on the YouTube. Skoke saying he's still a little bit frustrated with Donato on line 1. He says, just doesn't seem like he's good enough to keep control of the puck in the ozone for Bedsy and Hall. Tony, I want to get your thoughts on this because you know what? I'm still a big Ryan Donato fan, and I
think he just wants to pick a fight with you, Ronald.
No, I don't think he does. Skokes and I are boys. We don't get into fights. I think Skokes is onto something now that I've seen 4 games of this top line together. Well, we'll call it 2.5. Obviously, Hall not being there makes it a very different line, I think. I think Ryan Donato, maybe in a perfect scenario, is like second or third line on this team. I think he can play more of his game better, right? Because on that top line, you have
I think the question comes in, though, Ron, who do you want to see up there?
And that's the problem. I don't know. And I think that's where
who would you want to see?
I think right now, personally, I think the guy I would want to see is Taylor Radish. And I think it's because of the size, Tone. I think it's that big body that can be in front of the net, maybe create some screens for a guy like Connor Bedard, who is clearly garnishing all the attention every time he touches the puck. You know, we've seen Taylor Hall still be able to generate some chances, and he's been a good player too. But when you have that big body in front of the net, it makes it easier for your shooters. And he's going to go in and dig out pucks just like a guy like Donato does. He's going to just give you, I think, a little bit of a different look because he's that bigger body playing with skill. I think it's worth trying. I think that top wing spot in general was going to be a rotational kind of position all season long anyway. I think right now, too, with no Kurashev in the lineup and Athanasiou and Johnson having this weird chemistry, I kind of want to see them stay together right now. I'm kind of at the point where I feel like, yeah, Taylor Radish might make some sense because maybe Taylor Radish moving up in the lineup, maybe all of a sudden now that 4th line that we've seen a lot of with Gutman this year. Could you imagine Donato, Gutman, and like Boris Kachuk together? That's just a chaos line. That could be a really good. Could be a really good chaos line that has a scoring touch. And I think that's so critically important from the bottom 6. Obviously, we're seeing that with Perry and Foligno and Dickinson as kind of that third line that you love so much, Tone. But I really do think there's something to be said there. So I don't think Skokes is wrong to be frustrated. I think a lot of this season is going to be figuring out who plays well together. It just so happened all of the veterans kind of clicked immediately, and that line's been so good. but you're seeing the Athanasiu Johnson kind of chemistry come through so far. Maybe we see a lot of other things too come in. And like Skoke says here, he says, agreed. Donato plays a lot of dump and chase for two other line mates that don't chase. We'll see how that shakes out. He says Hawks have also been mentioned interested in Garland per Pagnota. I like what you bring that up, Skoke, because we are going to discuss the Garland rumors a wee bit here in just a couple of minutes. And one last one from the comments, Tone, before we go to a more team-wide approach. Beans wants to know who is Perry pointing at, LOL. He was pointing at the fans. They were talking shit, I'm sure. And he was just letting them know that he's not washed, because I bet you heard that he was washed because he's old. And I'm sure that goal felt really good for Mr. Scory Perry on that one. Tone, let's move forward. Looking at the special teams as a whole, really good for them tonight because, well, the power play drought is over. They absolutely needed that one, as we mentioned already. Johnson got the goal there. But, Tony, maybe the bigger story that really, I think, flew under the radar in this game, a very good power play unit over there in Toronto was held off the score sheet. 4 for 4 was the Blackhawks PK tonight. And I think we can note guys like Taylor Radish, who last year was just this 20-goal scorer, and he's a big body, but he's an offensive big body. No, he wants to kill penalties, and he looks really fucking good doing it. So does Boris Kachuk. So do all these guys that are stepping onto the ice and killing penalties for the Blackhawks right now. I think they're taking pride in killing penalties right now. And, I mean, tonight was a huge one. You kept Austin Matthews, who, for anybody that isn't scoreboard watching through the first couple games, he's got 6 goals already. And I think this was the Leafs' 3rd game of the season. Like, he is on fire. Back-to-back hat tricks for him in the first 2 games. He's held scoreless off the sheet. No Marner tonight. Nylander was quiet. All these elite players. Only Tavares got on the board tonight for the Leafs. Big kudos to the PK unit tonight, Tony, and them going 4 for 4.
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up right there, Ron. Wouldn't you take pride in killing penalties? I don't think they've given up one.
Absolutely.
I don't think they've given up one yet this season. Something that we commented on last week is that the special teams looked good. And when I think of special teams, for some reason, crack them, I always think of the PK first, because you can miss on a fair amount of power plays and still come up victorious. But if you're giving up power play goals and your PK sucks ass, you are going to be in a world of trouble. And so far, and we mentioned this just a little bit ago, who would have thought that the defense was going to be a strength for this team? And it has been so far through 4 games. Don't know if this rate is sustainable throughout the year. I mean, history tells you that it's going to be really hard to kill every single penalty that you face in the NHL. There's some really, really dangerous units out there. Tonight was one of them, though, as you mentioned. I thought that, I thought Matthews was going to score at least 1 or 2. Just you come in on back-to-back hat tricks. He was as hot as anybody in the NHL, if not the hottest player, finding the back of the net. And to hold him off the score sheet, to hold Marner off the score sheet, you gave up, was it 4 tonight, as you mentioned? I don't know a Blackhawks team in the last 3 years that doesn't give up at least one of those. So
100%.
I mean, that's growth right there, right before your eyes.
That it is growth indeed. Well put, Tony. Skoke says big PKs and Vlasic out there hustling and clearing pucks. Unreal. I'm telling you. Vlasic was a guy I remember when they drafted him, I was excited about, and everybody was like, but he's big and he doesn't score. And I'm like, yeah, but that's okay, because hockey's a beautiful game like that, where guys like that can still make you excited about how they play the game of hockey. And Vlasic, I think, is doing that for all of us right now here, Tone. Couple of just very quick minor things before we talk about the rumors that Skokes brought up here in the comments just a few minutes ago. We got our first holy jumping from Mr. Darren Pang tonight.
We did.
That was fun. It was, you know what, Tony? I knew when they announced that it was going to be Darren Pang. I've always liked Darren Pang as a commentator, but it feels right. You know what I mean? It still gives that sense of a guy that's familiar to the Blackhawks franchise, because he, was a part of those teams in the 80s, and he's been around, and he's a very successful broadcaster and well respected. Like, it was painful, Tone, when we lost Olczyk, and I think it still is for a lot of people, because Eddie is just.
I don't think you can have this conversation, Ron, without also bringing the other half of the broadcast crew into the conversation.
Agreed and understood. And I think I will say this for the people that I know don't like Vosters, and I have my reasons and not reasons of liking him and not liking certain things. But to me, he and Darren Pang mesh well. And I think that's incredibly important for the Blackhawks broadcast because half of it is who is your guide next to you, right? Pat Foley and Eddie Olczyk had a relationship. That's why that was so unique and so well respected and just a perfect narration of Blackhawks hockey. Not to say this is the next great tandem to call Blackhawks games, but they do flow very well together. It doesn't feel awkward. We talked about it last year with Vosters and Murray feeling like these two polar opposites on the broadcast that at times made it really kind of, I don't want to say totally unwatchable, but it made it a lot less enjoyable to watch. This year, though, I feel like Pang and Vosters have had a good back and forth. I think they're on the same page. And I think for even the casual hockey fan, Tony, that you sometimes a good broadcast will draw extra people in because they'll be a little more, they feel like they're more part of the game. I think Pang does that well with Vosters. And I mean, he's Darren Pang. He's a true professional. He's been doing it on the national level for how many years? But it was cool getting a holy jumping out of Blackhawks, broadcast. It felt like it kind of a full circle moment, right? Because he was a Blackhawks player, and it was weird him being with the Blues, and it's such an iconic, one of his iconic one-liners. We got the first.
Are you still taking Darren Pang and Chris Vosters over Pat Foley and Eddie O? Because I've got a lot to say on this.
I don't think I would, but unfortunately, Foley's retired, right? Like he wouldn't make a boomerang, right? Eddie Olczyk, in theory, until he retires, could always boomerang and come back to the Hawks. If
that's
things
true,
ended
but
up
you'd
going
have to
downhill.
now remove Darren Pang
right
from that.
Yeah.
I still saw
like,
a lot of things on the X machine, and just watching this game in my living room with my wife, where we're sitting there going, "What the heck was that?" From Vosters, and I know that there's been moments, and I'm also with you. There's reasons I like him, but we're very early in this run. What do they have?
sure,
2 games under their belt regular season. There's some
two.
preseason stuff. Some people don't tune into preseason hockey and hear them on the microphone. So we're under 10 games in. I'm just going to say maybe we want to dial it back a little bit and let it sort of go out there, but maybe this might ruffle some feathers. I don't know if we're at there yet, but we'll open up the segment for a second. Did the Blackhawks bring in Darren Pang because they needed a veteran voice in the color analyst role because of the feedback they got on Vosters last year, to give people a reason to tune in and give him a really experienced guy that has Blackhawks ties, which is something we asked for. And the Blackhawks have done a very good job of following feedback and going through things. I don't know if it's 100% sold that Vosters is going to be here throughout this full Connor Bedard era run. I still think that there's a chance that you see Darren Pang with a different play-by-play guy. I don't know about you.
How do you think Darren Pang would sound with Ron Luce?
I mean, Ron Luce should be the play-by-play guy, and maybe we need to get out there and test the play-by-play.
Maybe we do, Tony. Maybe we do, and maybe we'll encourage all of our Four Feathers listeners to be on the lookout for that, because there might be something here in the works where you may or may not hear Mr. Marchese and I over a Blackhawks broadcast, and we'll explain more on that later down the road. Tony, also, I thought, speaking while we're on the topic of Vosters, it made me giggle just because I hadn't heard this before, at least not in my recollection of it. Chris Foster's calling a hockey stick a sword was
that was one of them that
threw me off a little bit.
Jen brought that one up. Oh. Jen brought that one up. She's like, a sword? Now I want an edit made with all the Blackhawks players out there with swords.
I want a lightsaber. I want to go to war. I don't know. It was interesting. That one really caught me off guard. He was like, "Oh, get another sword." I was like, "Oh, never heard it called that before." So, see, look at that. We stayed on topic.
It's very medieval of the Vosters tonight.
It did. Well, hey, it's the medieval stomping grounds of the sport of hockey up there in Canada. So maybe that's where his head was. Who knows? But Tone, before we get into looking ahead and ruffling some feathers and distributing some salt shakers, one last thing, as Skokes noted earlier, the Blackhawks were reportedly a part of the rumor mill today that Connor Garland services are on the radar. For those of you that don't know who Connor Garland is, he started as a forward for the Arizona Coyotes, was a part of that Oliver Ekman-Larsson trade that sent OEL to the Vancouver Canucks back in 2021. He was subsequently signed to a 5-year deal, just under $5 million per year. And in year 3 of that contract, they're in cap trouble and they need to get out of it. And Tony, this feels eerily familiar because, as I noted over at ontapsportsnet.com talking about this exact topic, GM KD did this a year ago when he picked up Jason Dickinson, who has been a beautiful addition to the Chicago Blackhawks roster and also acquired a second-round pick in the process because he took on Dickinson's full contract. They could easily do the same for Connor Garland. Garland, a really solid player, too, for those that don't understand. He's a winger. He's kind of gritty, over 45 points in the last 2 seasons in Vancouver, had a better year than the year prior to last, but still, I believe 52 and 46 points respectively over the last 2 years for Connor Garland. 4.95 for this year and 2 more years after it, Tone. And if you get a sweetener in because you take the whole contract on, I'm here for it if GMKD wants to pull the trigger.
I mean, what would the price be on it, Ron? I mean, you're more involved in league-wide. What does the price look like for that? Are you giving up anybody off the NHL roster? I don't know. Is it?
I think there's a world where the Vancouver Canucks are desperate enough where if the Blackhawks said, hey, we'll give you one of our multiple 3rd-round picks, they might even not have to go that high. They might be able to say, hey, we'll give you one of our 4th rounders in the next 2 years. You give us a 3rd or a 2nd, plus we'll take on all of Connor Garland's contract. Because mind you, just to get rid of Jason Dickinson's $2.67 million, all they gave up was Riley Stillman. Not to say, he's not a bad player, but he's not even in Vancouver anymore. He's in Buffalo now, or at least he was last time I checked. Vancouver just wanted the cap relief. He was a $1.3 million contract. They needed defensemen. They said, you know what? Let's do it. But the Hawks still got a 2nd-round pick and Dickinson for Stillman. I think you could give a 4th or a 5th-round pick, probably get Garland and a draft pick in the first 3 rounds. Obviously, probably not a 1st-rounder, but at least a 3rd-rounder. And you just say, yeah, we'll take the whole 4.95 for the next 3 years because this year it don't matter worth a shit. Next year, sure as fuck don't matter worth a shit. And the year after it don't matter worth a shit because after that 3rd year, the only player that's going to be actively under contract besides Connor Bedard when he's inevitably extended is going to be Seth Jones. That's it. Nobody else. And honestly, really, if you look after next year, the only person that goes with Jones for another year is Connor Murphy.
I need GM Ron to build a spreadsheet.
I can do a big diagram on a whiteboard for you if you wanted me to.
Yeah, well, let's get a spreadsheet going of Blackhawks contract statuses for a while, and that way we can graphically display this for the listeners. But this makes sense to me. I mean, if you can get it for the price, that would be awesome. I know Skokes just threw a comment in here, but his mind is going the same place I am. Does he immediately jump in and become a first-line player? I think so.
Yeah, I think so as well. Again, the track record. He's been a middle 6 player in Vancouver for the most part. He's gotten some power play opportunity.
Plus, Garland is a cool and tough name in the city of Chicago as well.
It is a cool and tough name. And, he's a very good hockey player that just, I think gets forgotten in the shuffle because Vancouver does have talent. They just have just as many cap issues as they do talent, unfortunately for them. So I think in Garland's case, he absolutely steps in. Maybe he's the answer on that top line. And you know what you have at least, Tone? You have a lot of hard decisions on a nightly basis that Luke Richardson has to make, which is weird to say for how the state of this roster is, but they have a lot of good hockey players. Maybe they don't have a lot of elite talent yet, but they have a lot of good hockey players on this team. Philip Kurashev still isn't back yet, among others. This is going to be a very deep roster to watch for the course of the season. And there's a very good chance that we see guys like Mackenzie Entwistle and maybe Boris Kachuk and even Reese Johnson, who we saw a little bit of, B, in Rockford being heavy contributors down there just because there's so much forward talent on this Blackhawks roster for the time being. Tony, with that on the mind, Skoke said that it's exactly what he was thinking. It really is a move I think the Hawks need to consider making. If the price is right, the Connor Garland deal. And again, there's a lot of teams in on Garland. Let's make that noted here. The Blackhawks were listed probably amongst 6 or 7 teams that have been in the rumor mill via Mr. David Pagnota. So it's not just the Hawks and the Canucks talking. It's going to be a bidding war, but still, perhaps there's a chance here if you are the Blackhawks that you could get a player who is going to help Connor Bedard because he's a guy that will go into the corners and play that gritty style of a game, but still be a scorer, maybe a little bit of a better scorer than Ryan Donato.
Would we go as far as to say you would fit the Luke Richardson system?
I think I would confidently say that. Yes, I would, Tone. So it's understandable why the Blackhawks are interested in Connor Garland because to what you just noted, Tony, he absolutely does fit Chad Richardson's system. You see, Johnny's got me calling him Chad Richardson now. It's Chad Luke Richardson for all those that, in case you didn't know. But it's good old CLR and the Hawks. Connor Garland will look good in the Hawks uniform. Tony, road tripping is coming to a close. This 5-game road trip will come to an end on Thursday, October 19th. They are in Denver to play the Colorado Avalanche. That's a nice late game. That is some Pacific, almost time zone hockey. I believe they start at, I think it's 9:30. It might be 8:30. I have to double check.
It's 9:30.
I believe it's late too. So it's going to be a late one. We talked about our predictions. You said 3-2. I said 2-2-1 or 2-3. We're at the crossroads. They're 2-2. How do you think Thursday goes for this Blackhawks team?
Unfortunately, I thought that the Hawks were going to get one in Montreal, and I had one of those 2 losses coming to Colorado, so I'm a little bit conflicted. But I'll double down on my original prediction here. Come out with a win here. I think that would be a great way to start the season and come back home for their first game on Saturday. The fact that you're sitting here 2-2, very impressive. I can see this one potentially going to overtime in Colorado. Colorado is, wow. I mean, they're just a top 4 team in the league, at least on paper. Ron, I mean, they're up there. I just want to see them come back home above 500. I think the vibes at the United Center for their brief little homestand would be just fantastic. The schedule doesn't lighten up. You're going to have to steal some games. Why not do it in Colorado?
Yeah, why not do it in Colorado? I like where your head's at, Tony, and completely agree. After that Thursday game, as you kind of hinted at, the Blackhawks are finally home. The home opener is this coming Saturday on October 21st. They will host the Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights at the United Center. And then on Tuesday, they are back at home as well. This time it's against the Boston Bruins on Tuesday night. That's a 7:00 start. And Ron Luce may or may not have tickets that he will be looking to get rid of. So for Feathers listeners, if you might want to go to the game, keep an eye out in case that opportunity becomes available. We would happily love to give some of our listeners a chance to go watch the Hawks at the UC. Tony, it's time to ruffle some feathers before we get out of here. Mine is quickly all the fans who didn't like the Perry edition can shush, and that is for you, Mr. Comiskey. Even Tony, there's people that wanted Domi over Perry, I think was even mentioned on that Corey Perry episode.
From that camp?
For the other co-host. Yes, that was from you. So, you know what? I didn't think he was going to be this good offensively this quickly, but I liked what he brought. And you know what? It feels weird still seeing Corey Perry in a Blackhawks jersey. I won't deny that, but he and Nick Foligno are becoming players that I think the city of Chicago is going to love by the time their season, is really in the heart of it, January, February, when people have fully adopted hockey after all the other sports have kind of come to an end. Tony, how are you going to ruffle some feathers tonight? Because I tried to ruffle your feathers a little bit.
Yeah, I ruffled mine a little bit earlier. I can't remember what exactly it was, but I sort of shot that take out already. So
with Mr. Foster's, you ruffling some feathers.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, I'll tell you what, Tone, we got to give out some salt shakers. You sent me
Yes, we
one
do.
a little bit earlier. Talk to me about it. How salty was number 34 for the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I mean, Austin Matthews gets the salt shaker tonight. Towards the end of the game here, and this is part of the most poetic series in the game in the last minute. Down low, he's going down low. He's looking for a call on the cross check. He was absolutely salty. You can hear him screaming at the ref from just, he wants that power play so he can go and get a goal. Obviously, Toronto goes on to score, and that gets called back. We sort of went over that whole entire thing. But not only that, Ron, everything that's been this Canadian swing of the road trip has been just filled with sodium. Why don't you talk a little bit about what was going on in Montreal last night?
Yeah, Tony, my salt shaker giving out was all the fans in Montreal who booed Connor Bedard every time he touched the puck. Connor Bedard commented on it, said he actually loved it. He thought it was entertaining, and he was all for it. Connor Bedard is not shaken up by your boos. But let's be honest, the entire country of Canada just wanted Bedard for themselves. Instead,
Did you
they
see the
get
guy in the
salt.
Bedard jersey, the Montreal Bedard jersey that made its rounds on the?
I did not.
So there was a guy in attendance at the game on Saturday. Bedard even had the C on the jersey, just in a in a Canadiens jersey, 98, everything, the whole 9 yards. I think that guy was probably the most salty because he dropped. I don't know what the conversion is into Canadian currency. You're in the accounting world. Can you tell me how much that would cost over there, Ronald? He had to have
I'm
dropped
working.
a serious amount of cash on this thing, and now he's stuck with a Connor Bedard jersey for a team that Connor Bedard will most likely never play for. So it's obvious why they're salty. Ron's working on some international currency conversions. You're close, Ron.
Yes, we are getting close.
He's getting close to the answer. But yeah, I mean that entire game, man. Every time he touches the puck, just raining down in booze.
About 340 Canadian dollars, give or take.
There we go. And that's the Four Feathers podcast difference. We can convert dollars to Canadian dollars under a minute there, Ron. Excellent work.
Thank you. Thank you. We were ferociously doing research as to what the exchange rate was in order to do that math. So we were able to pull it off. Tone, I completely agree. Lots of salt in Canada over the course of the last two games, but the Blackhawks come out with a split. Despite the 3-2 loss on Saturday, the Blackhawks make up for it tonight against the Maple Leafs with a 4-1 victory. As we noted, 2 days off before the Blackhawks play the Colorado Avalanche in Denver on Thursday night. Tony, what's on tap next for the Four Feathers podcast? We'll be back for a Blackhawks happy hour when specifically haven't entirely nailed that down yet, but it will be either Thursday or Friday, right around that sweet spot when you get off of work. And because here at On Tap Sportsnet, the old weekend starts on Thursdays, it will for sure be a Hawks happy hour either Thursday or Friday. Be sure to tune in with us for that. We'll be talking either about the game, previewing the Colorado game, or recapping it on that Friday and looking ahead to what's to come over the weekend. Tony, before we get out of here, again, reminding everybody, follow the Four Feathers podcast all over socials at Four Feathers Pod. Be sure to follow us as well at On Tap Sportsnet. And you know the drill. Like, subscribe, hit that bell button on the YouTube, and you will always know when the Four Feathers podcast goes live. Tony, a 4-1 victory tonight, despite a 3-2 loss over the weekend. A Canadian split A, the title of our episode tonight. And until later this week, my friend, it's always a pleasure. Let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.